โอเคโอเคอ่าโอเค Curtis
Hey, how are you?
okay we are here okay now we are live broadcasting via my YouTube channel BizKlass สวัสดี BizKlasser ที่ติดตามเพจ BizKlass นะครับ Your Master Class กับผมเล็กมนชัยนะครับก็เจอกันเป็นประจำที่เพจของ BizKlass ทาง Facebook Fanpage นะครับ BizKlass แล้วก็ bizklass.com YouTube Channel BizKlass นี้ด้วยนะครับวันนี้ชวนกันคุยกลับมาอีกครั้งหนึ่งกับ Curtis Chin นะครับซึ่งก็เป็นอดีตทูตสหรัฐไปประจำอยู่ที่ ADB แล้วก็เป็นนักเดินทางเป็นคนที่มีประสบการณ์ในการท่องเที่ยวและไปเจอกับผู้คนอยู่เยอะมากวันนี้เลยมาพูดคุยกันครับว่าCurtis ตอนนี้จัดรายการอยู่ที่เวอร์จิเนียที่สหรัฐอเมริกาคนอเมริกันที่นั่นเป็นยังไง100 วันของไบเดนที่นั่นเป็นยังไงด้วยนะครับตอนนี้ก็จัดรายการพร้อมกันกับเรานะครับ Hello Curtis
Hey, Akunlek, how are you? Good day to you.
I think I'm doing good I think
Great to hear. Hello to all my friends in Thailand.
and what about you how are you
Hey, doing well. You know, I'm, as you know, based now in the United States, although I have a place in Thailand, which I haven't seen in a long time. But looking forward, of course, to Thailand getting back on its feet as we're slowly doing so here in the United States. But best wishes to everyone in Thailand.
all right and one question one big question for me is why Americans still have hope during this hardest time the COVID era because I heard from the news that Americans are getting out of their house and seems like going back to the right track or something like that what happened
Well, you know, as you know, I think Americans in general are a hopeful people, or at least I think so.
Really?
But also, I think it's also a perspective because when you look at the numbers, let's say comparing the United States and Thailand, the reality, the numbers of deaths in the United States are sadly so many more than in Thailand, right? You know, I looked at the numbers this morning. And what Thailand has lost probably a little bit more than 200 lives, you know, a terrible amount of deaths. But then you look at the numbers in the United States, some 570,000 or so deaths. So sometimes I think part of it is perspective. You know, I think when you said, you know, the worst times for the United States were pretty much probably a year ago. It was April and May of last year when there was such fear and worry in the United States. And so even though you compare what is going on in Thailand and what is going on right now in the United States, I find my friends here in the United States are indeed hopeful. And I think that's driven partially by the vaccines and the progress that we're seeing. While my friends in Thailand, maybe you, I don't know, it isn't so hopeful, even though the numbers are relatively low compared to the United States. And so it's that difficult balance people are trying to have in every country of balancing how do you, address the pandemic, but how do you also address the economic hardships that have come with the pandemic? So I think here in the United States, to go back to your question, I think people are thinking it's getting better. While in Thailand, people are thinking it's getting worse. So let's hope that Thailand soon moves into that more hopeful phase of things. But clearly, a lot is going to depend on the rollout of the vaccine. I have many also American friends in Thailand. They are hoping that the United States will help them get vaccinated in Thailand. I hope that is something that the Thai government would support. That the more people, more countries can help people in Thailand get vaccinated. That's a good thing for Thailand and, of course, for my fellow Americans who are living in Thailand.
And for sure, vaccination matters, right?
Oh, of course. I'm not one of the vaccine skeptics, but I can also understand why some people are skeptical. Because you think about it, at least in the United States, you don't get a vaccine approved this quickly. And really what has happened is that it's an emergency authorization for the use of these vaccines. And so here in the United States, people are mainly getting the Pfizer one, but clearly, I think there are 3 now, maybe more approved in the United States. I myself have only gotten 1 shot so far. I've gotten the first dose of the Pfizer shot, and I think next Monday I'll get the second one. So yeah, I think slowly it's rolling out in America, but we're also seeing some people be skeptical that maybe they don't want to get the vaccine because things are indeed getting better. So I hope that doesn't become a really big issue, because clearly we need more and more people vaccinated if we are to get a handle on this pandemic. And that's a message to people in Thailand too, that when you do have the opportunity to get vaccinated, I certainly hope people will take advantage of that opportunity sooner rather than later. Because no one country, whether it's the United States or China or Australia, can feel safe in their own borders ultimately until this whole world addresses the pandemic. We are indeed, it's like a hashtag, but we are stronger together. Yeah.
Right. I wonder, how could the White House provide 3 million doses vaccination a day?
Well, I think if there's one thing the United States does good, it's logistics. And so, but it does require coordination at that lowest level. So we're going now down the states and cities, but also, and for me, it's a message to Thailand and the rest of the world too. It's a partnership between the government and the private sector and nonprofits. Because, in New York, actually, for me, it's amazing. In New York, you can actually walk in and get a vaccine right now from a drugstore. And so that's a partnership with local drugstores, but the government had to get the vaccines to them, but it's relying on others. So for me, it'd be almost like if in Thailand, maybe this will happen, but if there were authorized nurses and pharmacists in your local, welcome, could you get a vaccine there? If the country could deploy nurses to many different places, not just hospitals, that's one way you roll out the vaccine. Imagine if every 7-Eleven were set up in Thailand to deliver, if not a vaccine, information to people. Part of it is public education too. So I think the United States, remember all the terrible things that we've been through this last year. Look at those numbers of deaths. So it is a slow process, but again, it is actually a hopeful moment in the U.S., but we cannot declare mission accomplished too soon.
And one of the most important thing that for me as a Thai, see your leader, Joe Biden, his performance, how could I say, it's really good during his maybe 100 days, right? First 100 days. How do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. I can't remember if now it's like 112 days, 115 days. But yeah, it's a famous measuring point, those first 100 days, how well is the president doing? And I think, I think sadly, the country, the United States, is still divided. When you look at the actual polling, the data out there, people are supportive of the president. That's a good thing. But there's still a large number of people that are not supportive of the president, which I can't say is such a wonderful thing. But when it comes down to policies, clearly some people will be for and some people will be against. But where he does get good remarks is something that you just asked about, is handling the pandemic so far. But also the reality, we're so partisan, sadly, in America. But the reality is Biden is building on a program that President Trump put in place, which was to speed the development of vaccines. So, every president, maybe in Thailand, every prime minister kind of doesn't like what the last president or prime minister does. But the reality also is that Biden is building on some of the successes of Trump, while also changing some of the policies of Trump. So when you look at those first 100 days and then you begin to look at the different policies, what you'll find is that some areas, like dealing with the pandemic, he's getting very high marks for. But on dealing with what is a border crisis in the United States, on our southern border with Mexico, and people coming across the border into the United States, he's getting relatively poor remarks. But net, I'd say, let's give this president a chance. I'd give him a B- or a B, let's say, if we had to grade him. But clearly, you can't decide how well he's going to do for all 4 years in these first 100 years. But I hope that Americans can get behind him, at least in the handling of this pandemic. And then my hope also is that in Washington, both parties, Republicans and Democrats, can come together and get other things done, like addressing our infrastructure in the United States. For those of you who haven't yet been to the United States, yes, it's amazing in many ways, but in other ways, our infrastructure, our roads and bridges and trains are so much kind of less good than they are in many places in Asia. So that's the good and bad and the wonderfulness of America. It's that kind of, contrast. But the key now is to move forward.
And what's about a tax increase? We are looking for the response from the private sector.
Well, it's interesting, and it goes down always into the details, So the president has said that no one making less than $400,000, a lot of money, will have their taxes increased. But then when you look at the details, maybe that's not the situation. But also businesses are beginning to react to what will be an increase on businesses in terms of taxation. And something here in the United States is called capital gains. It's like when you invest in something and then it grows over time. Yes. What is that investment taxed at? Should it be taxed less to encourage people to invest, or should it be taxed more? And so I think those are the kinds of the details that people will be battling it out in Washington. But I hope we don't also skip some of the lessons of Trump and Bush and Obama, which is one key lesson for me, is that the strength of America are small businesses, medium-sized businesses. It's not just the brands that you will know, the Coca-Colas of the world, the Microsofts of the world. It's those really millions of regular business people, like maybe many other people that watch BizKlass, just regular business people. What would they say if their taxes are going up? In the United States, if you're like a sole proprietor, let's say, so maybe it's like you run a business. It's not like a huge company. Some of them actually, when they file their taxes, it's almost like as if their taxes were them. And so what if that individual business person made $400,000 in revenues? How should that be taxed? Should it be increased or decreased? I don't know. And so those are things that I hope people will think through. So even let's say in Thailand, as people think about taxation, should taxation be a way simply to raise revenues? Or should taxation also be a way to encourage businesses and companies and people to behave a certain way? There's no right or wrong, but hopefully that's something that's discussed openly and not decided behind the scenes, because regular people will be impacted.
There's a never-ending dispute when we talk about taxation. I've got a question from Kun Kirati, our audience. Do Americans have faith in those who are in charge? As Thai citizen, it's quite sensitive question. As Thai citizen, the problem is not only that we are skeptical about the vaccine, but we are skeptical about a big guy. Or
since I'm the American, I'll answer the American part, and then Kunlek, you will answer the Thai part. How about that? So I spoke about.
Actually, I'm not going to talk about politics at all.
So I would just say, in America, I think that is actually a good question. Do you have trust? And then, my old life before, I was a diplomat, before I was an entrepreneur, before I was doing all these other things, I worked in a big communications company where one of the issues is indeed trust. So, whether, our big guy is a Biden, or it's my governor, or it's my mayor, how does that person build trust? It's based on his or her actions and also how they're communicated. And so I think it's early on for President Biden. Do people really trust him? That's a key question, because at one point you're just comparing him to the last president. You like the last president, you didn't like the last president. You're just comparing Biden to him. But at some point, Biden will again have to stand on his own. And then people will think through, do I trust him that he will do what he said he would do?
Do you?
For me personally, it's mixed, right? So we'll see, So for example, one thing that I personally was disappointed in, and our most famous, probably, or second most famous, Thai American Senator Tammy Duckworth was also disappointed in President Biden, was that he had said he would create a government that looked like America. And for me, a key testing point for Senator Duckworth, this amazing Thai American senator, a testing point was, would President Biden continue what has gone on for 20 plus years, which was having an Asian American among his 15 cabinet secretaries. So this would be like Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Transportation. This was said to Biden when he was the president-elect, and President Biden chose not to have a single Asian American among his 15 cabinet secretaries. So he stopped something that President Clinton began. Clinton, Bush, Obama, they all had an Asian American cabinet secretary. President Biden did not do so. So I can't necessarily trust him on some of these issues when you begin to look at some of the things he's done. But again, you judge a president based on so many different things. But very clearly for me, this is actually, I don't know if you know, in the United States, it's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So when we celebrate the diversity of America, including Thai Americans in America. I think I don't know if all your viewers know. I was a kid in Thailand. I grew up as a kid in Thailand because my father worked at the U.S. Embassy in Thailand when I was a little kid. So when I think about the diversity of America, including all these Thai Americans, Chinese Americans, how sad it is that President Biden chose not to have an Asian American cabinet secretary, despite his word that he would create, kind of a government that looked like us. And so he's got 4 more years minus 120 or so days. Let's see what he's done and let's give him a chance to move forward on this and other key issues.
Just wait and see. And
that's a key point for America. It is not just wait and see. This is a time also where Thai Americans, Asian Americans, and others have to speak up. One of the sad stereotypes of Asians in America is, if we're the model minority or we're so quiet, we suffer through these things and that's life. But kudos to Senator Tammy Duckworth. Maybe it's her Thai part of her that spoke up. And she even threatened President Biden and said, well, maybe I'll just hold up every nominee that doesn't, kind of represent this diverse America that you talked about in your campaign. So it's not just wait and see, it's the continuing of raising these important issues, even though President Biden might not be so thrilled. But my hope is that he will respect and not take for granted Thai Americans or any Asian American that raises these very important issues at this time, particularly this time when, as you've seen on TV, how sad Asian Americans have been really harassed and attacked in the United States at this time.
Yeah.
Sorry,
when it's the big issue in the United States, and when we talk about hate Asian crime or just something like that, now in Thailand we are discussing about this, and we wonder if I myself went along the road in New York City or something like that, or someplace in the United States, will be anyone attack me or slap at my face or something like that? I don't know the situation right now in the United States.
Yes, such an important question because, even for me, they don't care if you're a former ambassador or you're a billionaire or, your uncle, right? We're just like
even you are a billionaire.
It's an Asian face, right? Or a media star like you. It's an Asian face. But we don't know. And the reality is that when I walk outside, to be honest, nothing has happened to me. No one has beaten me up or spit up or, knock on wood for good luck. But the reality is that it's in my mind. And that's a change that now I think, what if something happens? What are the things I should do? Or what if I see something happening to someone else? How do I help that person? So going to your point, don't just wait and see. Don't be a bystander. How do we contribute to making this a better situation? And also what's important in the United States is also to recognize that different communities of people. So it's not just Asians helping Asians. It's Black people, white people, Latino people are also coming together to address this issue. So we need more of that very clearly. But indeed, my hope is that clearly nothing will happen to you. But I also say in America, the reality is that always be prepared. And think through these things, and hopefully you'll also have some allies should something happen. One of the things I've done, very interesting, the power of technology. Look at us. Usually I see you when I'm in Bangkok, but now we're on YouTube, we're streaming. Yeah. But I've also been able to use platforms like Clubhouse, like Twitter Spaces, to help raise money for local groups, helping push back against this Asian hate. So the hashtag is, often hashtag stop Asian hate. But how do we use that? And what, hashtag, yeah, it's like activism, on a tweet. But we're also using that to help raise money, to help push for changes and to push for legislative changes. So I have a great partner in this effort named Drew Kataoka, a Japanese American artist from California. And just through Clubhouse and talking like we're talking right now, we've raised, I think, going on $94,000 just by talking to help a terrific group in New York called the Asian American Federation that's doing everything from working with victims to pushing for legislative changes to really helping train people how to protect themselves. Because ultimately, even though our Congress and the US president might say or do something, a lot of change has to take place at that community level. So I think we need to use our platforms, like even here, let's say for Thailand, using social media platforms to bring information to Thai people so they're not just reliant on, one voice from government. How do we get the Thai private sector to also be engaged and to help people? One thing that's happened in the United States is that some Asian Americans, the reality is that maybe their English, isn't so great. Maybe their technological skills aren't so great. So they weren't quite sure how to make a vaccine appointment on their phone, right? And so people need to think through, how do we do things in local language? How do we help people do things if they're not so tech savvy so that they can get a vaccine? And so that's something done in the United States. And hopefully there are things like that too in Thailand as companies think about their responsibility as a small business, medium-sized business. What are the things that can be done for your local neighborhood? There's so many great things that go on in Thailand through Buddhist temples, right? Through a different community based around temples. But I also think there are other ways that you can get out information. And one is very clearly the power of Thai people, Thai entrepreneurs, Thai business people.
All right. That's really important, Curtis, because now you are there at in Virginia, the United States, right? And here in Thailand, many Thais, including me, we are now, how could I say, we are really worried about the situation of COVID-19 pandemic and something like that. And yes, we are freaking out.
Understandable.
Am I going to die? Am I dying or something like that? I can go outside. I can eat outside. I got to stay home all day long or something like that. Anything as an American, anything you want to tell Thais who are struggling with this, how could I say, emotional situation?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I would say is that that's perfectly normal. So it's actually normal to be freaked out, right? But then also there's I'll say a burden, but then you also need to think through what information you have to help protect yourself. It's interesting, here in the United States, one of the things that I focused on, we talk about helping Asian communities, helping Thai American communities here, is that, again, maybe sometimes people's English is not perfect. How do you deliver something in a culturally sensitive and in a language appropriate way? And one of the services that is delivered to people that isn't always accessed by Asian Americans is really mental health support. So, it's very American to say, well, we should talk about it. Let's discuss it, right? And all. But also, I would say there's a benefit from also communicating to people like here who are Thai Americans who might not speak English. But again, remember, many Thai Americans do speak English very well. But for those parts of our community that don't necessarily speak English well, how do we also reassure them and give them mental health support? I think too often the words mental health sounds like, oh, that's a bad thing, right? But really, think of it as just one more aspect of health. We do all we can to be physically healthy, eat the right things, go exercise. Let's also remember that there are ways we can also be mentally healthy, whether it's communicating to people, getting insights from others. But we need to think through also in Thailand, how do we address those mental health issues? So clearly, I would say, everyone reacts to the pandemic in their own way. There's no right or wrong. But certainly, if how you're reacting is making your health even worse, we need to think through, what could you do differently? How do we help you? And it's been interesting. I remember, as you know, I'm also with this think tank called the Milken Institute, which does a bunch of panels, a lot online, but a lot of convenings, whether Singapore at a big Asia summit or our global conference in Los Angeles. But we're also doing some of these virtual panels where some of the issues we've addressed are things like mental health. And I remember one that was done. It was interesting because it was with the head of a group that actually is using your mobile phone as a way to get support to people. So I think they texted a number, and what a person would reply back is a authorized counselor. So just someone to talk to that maybe if you didn't feel comfortable talking to your friend, an authorized counselor could speak to you. So again, thinking through how do we use technology to innovate, to give people access to resources at what admittedly is a very difficult time. So, if you're freaking out, it's perfectly normal. But then let's take the next step and think through what do we do next? How to make sure you're not freaking out every single day. As an optimist, I think things will, of course, get better, whether it's the United States or in Thailand. But Thailand's in that situation where maybe things seemingly are getting worse, at least in terms of the numbers. But maybe hope will also soon follow as people get vaccinated. I mean, think about our diverse, amazing, wonderful world. And my heart goes out really to what is going on in India. And so kudos to Thailand, where I saw Thailand, even amidst its own troubles, delivered an airplane full, I don't know if it was oxygen or other support to the people of India. And I think for me, that's an important message too, that even though we might all be freaking out, there might be someone who's even more freaking out than us. So also think through how we can help people across borders, or even if, as you know, when I'm in Thailand, both from my days when I was a kid in Thailand, or living there now and helping a Thai business there, I travel around the country. And I remember once, I was in Mae Sot, visiting Karen, kind of refugee
the northern
camp.
of Thailand.
Yeah, and as you know, some Thai people have done amazing work helping some of these people from Myanmar. But there's a whole bunch of stateless people in a way. Are they from Myanmar? Are they from Thailand? And it makes you think, how are they getting the vaccine? Right? If you think about migrant workers in Thailand, how are they getting the vaccine if they're not Thai citizens? Right? And so I think we also need to think about, even in our own respective countries, Thailand and the United States, how do we help those that are most in need, particularly if they're not necessarily US or Thai citizens at this point in time?
Right. When yes, and one of our topics today is about the importance of this month, right? The May.
Well, that's where I talked about a little bit already. For me, the one is important because it is Asia Pacific American Heritage Month, right? So to all Thai people and to all Thai Americans, happy Asia Pacific Heritage Month. It's interesting also as you think about the diversity of America. I would say to the people of Thailand, also recognize there are a lot of people in Thailand that might be from different minority groups, whether we say Hell tribes or people who've come up from Malaysia and have long settled in Thailand. I think we should also celebrate also the diversity and all of that has been contributed to create the amazing place that Thailand is today. I wrote a piece for the Nikkei, which is like a weekly publication, which you can get in Thailand. But I wrote a piece for Nikkei Asia, and it was about that in America we're having this kind of a year we've seen of increased Asian hate, and sadly it only got some attention or more attention because of a Thai grandpa, Kun Vichai Ratanapakdi, who was killed in a terrible incident on the streets of San Francisco, which then led to more stories and all. And so for me, when I think of that incident, and then all my Thai friends saying to me, what's going on, in the United States? Clearly, the United States needs to get its house in order. But the piece I wrote in the Nikkei also said that this message of stop Asian hate is also a message for Asia. so that every country, every place, whether it's a Japan or a Thailand or a Hong Kong or a Singapore, where the Milken Institute Asia Center is based, we also need to think through in those places, how do we treat our fellow Asians? Like if you're in Singapore, they might not be Chinese Singaporeans, but they're migrant workers from Sri Lanka, from Malaysia, from the Philippines, a very international place. How well are they treated? So it might not be an issue of hate, but it is an issue of equal treatment of our fellow Asians in whatever country we happen to be living or working in. But also serious messages. But this month is also a celebration. So a celebration of Asian culture, of Thai culture, food. As I'm all about the food. And so one of the great things that your Thai embassy in the United States does is also celebrate Thai food. And they did that also as part of this looking at Asian heritage here in the United States.
All right. And of course, you miss Thai food, right?
Yeah, of course, we have
authentic Thai food.
Of course, I'm going to say we have great Thai food in the United States. Much cooked by both Thai people, Thai American people also. But yes, I do miss my cooked in Thailand Thai food. Right. But one of my messages here in the United States, and if you visit, is I say, support your local small restaurants and businesses, right? I think the reality is that we know that in this terrible difficult time, the big corporations will survive, right? Microsoft will still be there, Amazon will still be there, but who will struggle are those, maybe a Thai American family run restaurant or a shop. Let's figure out how to support them also, even though all we want to do is sit on the couch and eat Thai snacks and order on your phone or online. Let's think about how we help that person was on the street, selling food on the street, right? Let's think through that.
I heard about a huge amount of money that the White House prepared for the restaurant, right? To support the restaurant. How could the owner of restaurants there survive right now, or they are already died for maybe million or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know the numbers offhand, but yeah, if you look at some of the data from our, I don't know, maybe it's called the National Restaurant Association, so many restaurants sadly have failed during this time. My hope is that they will come back. One of the great things about the U.S. again is the rule of law, right? So that if sadly you go bankrupt, there's a process that means you go through that and then you can start again. So a restaurant that failed, maybe the owner, can start again. But what you just referenced wasn't just a White House program, but because I think our U.S. Congress had to authorize it. Yeah, just announced this month there is a program for restaurants to apply for assistance. And so like we talked earlier, one of the challenges is to make sure that maybe a restaurant run by an immigrant from Asia somewhere who doesn't really speak English knows how to apply to this program. So indeed, that's one of the important things that I'm also trying to use social media for, is to communicate to people about some of the things that the government is providing to assist I say regular people, but restaurants and smaller businesses, because they might offer it, but unless you apply and access it, you don't benefit.
All right, and let's go to our another topic, just like an Academy Award. What did you do there?
Like you, I was there virtually. Like you, weren't you there? Although I think you would be like early.
And the Oscars go to
goes to Colette for BizKlass. I'm merely a supporting actor in this great show.
But it seems like the Oscar this year was not really sensational, right?
Yeah, to be honest, for me, I was a little bit bored by the show because it's the era of the pandemic. Right, it's the era of the pandemic, so there wasn't the big crowds and an MC and all. But for me, actually, what was also interesting about this year, I think for the first time in the nominations and then in some of the wins, we saw Asian Americans or just Asian actors recognized. So it's funny. I wrote a piece again with my friend Drew Kataoka for something called Next Shark, which is actually a Asian kind of focused media platform. And then I wrote a follow-up piece in the South China Morning Post on the Oscars. And our point was that even though we love all these Hollywood blockbusters, think about how do Americans really know what a Thai person is. But I would say most Americans are not lucky enough, blessed enough to be able to have, like me, lived in Thailand for many years or work in Thailand like I do now, or visit Thailand. So what do they think? Their vision is maybe shaped by a movie or a TV show, where sometimes those visions of what they see on the screen are stereotypes of Thailand, which aren't always positive stereotypes. So Drew and I wrote this piece that argues that Hollywood has a lot more work to do in addressing stereotypes of Asian Americans, of Asians on film.
Sure.
One of the stereotypes is that, I don't know, we're all good at math. I don't know. We all play the violin. Who knows what it is, right? But I think this year we saw a richness or a richerness, can I say that, of some of the nominated films. Like a film called Minari, which you haven't seen, you should see, which is about Korean immigrants trying to begin like a new life in the middle of the United States as farmers. And the South Korean actress won Best Supporting Actress for it. Also, and this speaks to the diversity of what is an Asian American. There's a singer named Her, or she goes by H.E.R. Her, who's actually Filipina and Black, and she won an Oscar for Best Original Score, Best Song, I think it was. And so you see a more diverse mix of people on the screen, but Hollywood certainly has a long way to go in producing more content that also speaks to the real stories of real people around the world, including from Asia and the United States. So, but yeah, enjoy the. What's also funny is that as I think about it, I think of the films that were nominated for the Oscars, I saw, of course, none of them in a theater, and I probably saw only 2 or 3 of them. And so it's not the same. One of the great things I miss about Bangkok is the great movie theaters, right? I remember I went to actually the Thailand premiere, a film based on a book by my friend Kevin Kwan called Crazy Rich Asians, which of course was hysterical, right? But also they brought in, Singapore food and served it also in Thailand. But it's that sense of community, a shared experience that you don't really get sitting on your couch or watching something on your phone or your laptop. Right. So my hope is that will come back, even as the world of streaming will stay with us. We're so used to now watching things streaming. That should continue. Gives us more access to more things. We should also hopefully get that shared experience of the great movie theaters of this world also.
When we have faced this pandemic, such a big crisis, right, Curtis? And I can't remember what was my latest big movie I've just like maybe the Avengers or something like that. And now that production house and how could I say it, many movie makers just stop.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's also sad, where you think about Thailand has also become a production base for films. And so thinking through how does that continue at this time? Is it just, there's extra safety measures on sets that goes forward, or really are things all suspended? So, I saw, for example, that the Thai government was still hoping to open up Phuket to tourists.
Right.
And that maybe come October, things would be more open up. I mean, it's hard to predict because we don't know, is it like second wave, third wave, fourth wave? But I do think it's important for a government to think through how do you, again, balance, addressing health issues and real economic issues that are impacting people. I do not think it's realistic to say we will only open up when there are 0 cases, right? And I think we're watching right now, or I'm watching, both Hong Kong and Singapore as they kind of think through how do they handle this, I think with an eye towards 0 cases, but then does that really hurt the economy. So, actually, just before I went on your show, but I think your show is, of course, is much more exciting and dynamic. But I just was on Channel News Asia this morning with Singapore, and I said to them that even as economies get better, people begin to worry about inflation and other, consequence of a growing economy. Let's not lose sight that too often these recoveries are what we call K-shaped. So instead of being like a V and everyone gets better, it's almost like a K where like some people are getting better and some people are still getting worse, right? So if you think about business issues, you think about your business viewers, it may well be K-shaped where some businesses boom and do well and others do not. I think it's also important for a government to think through how we turn that K-shaped recovery into more of a V-shaped recovery. Are there special initiatives and programs to help some companies that will need more assistance to transition to a post-pandemic world, right? So I think that's what people should also speak up for also.
Yeah, indeed. And now here in Thailand, we're now facing the third wave of COVID-19, and how could I say the vaccination is coming. The mass vaccination is coming in for mass production or something like that. And yes, hopefully, we can open the country once again and open for the foreign tourists. And but don't you think we will back to the normal life, the previous life before COVID-19?
I think it'll be back to a more normal life, but also remember there are some things that will be different in a good way, also. So for example, that more things have gone almost like mobile. It's like almost like you put like tele or it's telemedicine, e-health, and hopefully some of that also continues. So that's a good thing, right? Thailand is a leader in some areas like, medical tourism, not just, tourism go to the beach, but you've seen people from around the world, from the Middle East, from Asia, from Europe, come to Thailand also for medical treatments, and so you think through how can those treatments also be further advanced by integrating in telemedicine aspects of things also. So indeed, things will hopefully become more normal, but let's hope the key phrase is always that hopefully we will build back better also. So again, if you think about Thailand and you think maybe during this time, more people have taken advantage of having food delivered to them. Before you go to the street, you buy things and maybe it gets delivered to you. So how we both continue that, but provide support for also what is also one of the great traits of Bangkok since when I was a kid, which is, going out, to buy things on the street. I love our street vendors. Yes, we have to pay attention to hygiene and making sure they get a living wage. But let's not wipe them all out and say, well, no, you order everything online, right? So I think there's some things that will go back to normal, but hopefully that normal is also a better normal than it was before. The other thing I would always note too, when we talk about the numbers, is that let's also not forget there's real people, real businesses behind these numbers. So when we talk, maybe the International Monetary Fund says that next year an economy will go 3% or 4% or 5% or 1%, whatever it is. Remember that percentage is made up of real people. And so let's not forget what is it that we can do to them to help them move forward. I think, one of the projects when I'm in Thailand, I'm there often for meetings. So I don't know if I'm working, but I'm in a meeting, right? And so all of that is moved online. But often my meetings are with a terrific Thai-based company called Equator Pure Nature that makes a line of cleaning products under the brand name Pipper Standard. So actually getting
all them.
Pineapple. I hope you went to the store and buy it. And so you get,
okay. I should have bought it. I will go to the department stores and supermarket and get it.
Okay, Pipper. I'm sure in my house somewhere I have a bottle, but it's a really unique kind of rectangle bottle. But for me, what's also important, why I got involved in that, it's what I call an impact company. And so it is trying to reduce the chemicals that Thai people use, but also it's doing so by giving some added value. So bringing the value added to an agricultural crop. So a lot of the products in Pipper Standard are based on pineapples. And so, but a Thai person selling pineapple, I go in the street, I can buy a bag of 6 little pineapples for not so much money. But how do you increase the value for the person who grew those pineapples? And I think one thing that's terrific is that, I'm sure it's like patented, all these processes, but Pipper Standard is taking, or buying, I should say, pineapple from Thai farmers to turn it into a value-added product, range of cleaning products from laundry detergent to fabric softener, and then selling it in Thailand, of course, but exporting it to places like Korea, like to Taiwan. And so how great that is for Thailand and for Thai people, that there is a brand created in Thailand that is now, I don't know, in 10, 12, 13 markets. So we need to do more of things like that, recognizing and helping innovations that are born in Thailand and then go out to the world.
All right.
So,
all right.
I'm like sitting in this funny chair, and then I'm going to bring a special guest.
Once again, please.
This is the Pipper Standard pineapple. I know. It's actually my...
Really? Pineapple?
So this is from Thailand. Right? So my little piece of Thailand here. See, I'm not allowed to do this, like show my pineapple on.
It's so cute. I saw that it's your guardian or something like that.
It's actually my seat cushion, so I can sit up and have my head the same size as yours on this TV screen. But for me, that's also about the fun of business too. I think a lot of your viewers maybe are in business, and I hope they're in business not simply to pay the bills and get a job, but to also recognize that business too is fun in its own way when you're creating jobs, you're creating a product. And so I always want to celebrate business, right? Because business is a key player if we're going to move countries forward. You can't just rely on your government. You can't just rely on some nonprofit group. They're all part of it, the world. But business is a key player in driving innovation and creating jobs and moving all of our countries forward.
Agree. Okay, and we got to conclude our conversation right now, and that's the update from America. And one last couple of questions.
Yes.
Maybe when we talk about the last government, Mr. Trump, we saw something between United States and China, and now it still happened. But are you going? No, I'm not going to ask you. Is the US going to fight with Russia? Russia, and we are now. How could I say it? It's quite spooky when we think about the Third World War or something like that, or some conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of conspiracy theories.
Can you think about that?
You could pay attention to. But I would say, whether it's a China or a Russia, I think what's important is to recognize that the actions needed to make a more peaceful world aren't all about the U.S. How is China behaving in your region? How is Russia behaving in your region? So clearly, when I think about these things, one of the luxuries I have of have lived and worked in so many places in Asia is also to think about how things play out on the ground in Asia. And when you look at actually some of the data from polling firms in Asia, you'll see in many ways that now that President Trump is gone, the least liked leader in Asia is often Xi Jinping, the head of China. Rightly or wrongly, that's what the data says. Right? And that's probably because of China's behavior in the South China Sea, in the Mekong region. And, we didn't talk about really, my heart really goes out to the people of Myanmar. How well is China behaving in Myanmar? So these are questions that, I look at from a very American viewpoint, but I would hope that Thailand and ASEAN, our beleaguered, beloved, and maybe not always as effective as I like it to be ASEAN, I would hope that the leaders of ASEAN can think through what should be done in Myanmar, what should be done with the Mekong region. When you think about the South China Sea and all the claims that some of the Southeast Asian nations have in that region. And I would say to these nations, judge how the U.S. behaves or judge how China behaves in these regions, and you decide what is better for your people. No one knows better what is better for Thai people than Thai people. That's my own feeling, but certainly I have my views. No, I thought you would end with a more fun question, like Curtis Chin, when are you ever going to get a haircut? And so I miss my Thai barber.
Me too.
I have this like pandemic here. No, you're like well groomed as always, but I miss things about Thailand, of course, friends and food, but my Thai barber. But I think we're all adjusting to this new normal. So what do you think? Short hair or this kind of weird kind of 60s hair? What do you think?
You look like a rock star right now. Asian
but
rock
you didn't
star,
answer
something like that.
which hair I should have. But
I think
anyway, you can tweet me.
It's
At least I have hair.
fine. It's okay. It's okay. But how do you think about your trip? How could I say? When will you go abroad? How long from today?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. My hope, of course, was always to be back in Singapore, where the Milken Institute Asia Center is based, or in Thailand, where I advise Pipper Standard, or in Indonesia, where I have many friends, or the Philippines. But the answer is really now based on how will these countries handle the pandemic. So what's playing out right now is that I think my first trips will now be in the United States. As the United States gets vaccinated, maybe I can fly to Los Angeles, where the Milken Institute headquarters is, or I can take the train to New York, right, if people are vaccinated. So that next trip could be in June, but it will be a domestic trip. As to when my next international trip is back to Asia, I'd say the answer is in Asia's hands, not mine. If Thailand can get its act together more than it's doing right now, it'll speed the return of investment and tourism to Thailand, which are so important. If Singapore can think through, is it realistic to have 0 cases, or is there some risk that they have to think about? My return to Singapore might be sooner rather than later. So I think the answer to that important question is in the hands of Asia.
Like
well, I'm still hoping. I'm still hoping for 2021, but at least you didn't say 2023. But again, also remember, Asia is so big and so diverse. I saw how people were trying to take advantage of travel bubbles between Hong Kong and Singapore. I saw how people were flying to Guam, which is kind of part of the United States, actually, and not so far, or maybe it's 4 hours from the Philippines, because they wanted a vaccine. Right? So the United States has begun to roll out vaccines, not just in the 50 states of the United States, but also in Guam, in American Samoa, in Puerto Rico. And so the U.S. Virgin Islands, you think about all these different territories and parts of America, the vaccine continues to roll out. And my hope is that Thailand will also think through its rollout of the vaccine and do it in a way that welcomes partnerships. So stateless people that might be on the Myanmar, Thailand border get a vaccine. So that Americans in Thailand get a vaccine. So I think every country is now struggling to find its own way forward. And my hope is that it's sooner rather than later. But who knows? My heart goes out to all those people really suffering and look at what's going on in India right now. So again, kudos to Thailand for doing what it can to help India. Because countries have to help, other countries at this time.
Yes.
But that's just me, Christian, in my philosophy of life.
It's just such a good conclusion, and that's our show today. And thank you very much, Curtis. Thank you for talking with me. Thank
Always
you for joining this
I hope to see you in person. I don't know. Hopefully 2021, but maybe 2022.
Hopefully. Thank you for talking with me, a typical Thai journalist who speak broken English and want to know what's going on Earth.
Not at all.
All right, and we can do this maybe monthly or weekly or something like that. And love to see you once again next time.
Always delighted. Not just
to
speak to you, but hopefully to speak to your Thai viewers through you. But so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.